The First Crusade was over. Of the 100,000 men who began the campaign, most would eventually return to Europe, having had only a glimpse of Muslim life. The job of occupying Jerusalem and the surrounding countryside fell to the 20,000 who remained, indefinitely. To secure their occupation, the intruders did here what they had done in Europe. They built castles.
The Crusaders built the finest castles that the Near East has ever seen, and the proof of that is that they're still there. When everything else may have faded away, the Crusader castles remain a living testimony to their presence. And Crac des Chevaliers in Syria is the Crusader castle over them all. It's very, very big, it's strong, it's impenetrable. It's a living example of the way that a number of the Crusader castles couldn't be taken by siege.
You can see for miles and miles from it and see the other castles that would have been, in visual distance for communication by fire and smoke signals. It's got, all the accoutrements of a good medieval castle with battlements and turrets and places for pouring boiling oil and other liquids down onto the enemy.
But inside that castle, what was life really like? It wasn't merriment and festivity, it was constant fear. You had to be on the lookout in case someone was trying to mine the castle or to climb over the walls with scaling ladders. The people outside, the population, the local peasantry, they were not friendly, so you had to watch their movements all the time. It was a terrifying place.
The Crusaders made treaties and broke them. They harassed the traders who passed by their castles. As they raided caravans, the Crusaders learned of a luxurious lifestyle unheard of in Europe.
Well, materially, the Crusaders were just blown away by what they found in the Middle East, and they took a lot of it back with them. Inlaid metalwork, textiles, silks, things like that they had just never seen in such quantities before. The good life. These things they brought back to Europe, some as souvenirs, and in fact there was a whole industry that developed in the Middle East of providing souvenirs for the Crusaders to take back.
It is perhaps a Western bias to imagine the Crusaders were a decisive force in world events, devastating to the Islamic culture and trade. The truth is, while the knights of the Crusades were bunkering down in their castles, Islam was spreading its influence and flourishing. Muhammad's message rang out as clear and strong as it ever had.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Ashhadu an la.
Mosques were now on every horizon. They welcomed traders. They housed schools and hospitals. Through Islamic architecture, literature and music, a vibrant culture was emerging in celebration of a singular faith.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر
Faith had launched an empire. Culture was now enlivening it. But ultimately, what united it was trade. For the Muslims, trade, like science, brought innovation. Business was expedited by a revolutionary concept called the sak, a cheque that could be written in Spain and cashed in India.
Writing a check assumes that someone's going to honor it and cash it at the other end, and that if you give the money or you have the money in one place, that someone will say, I have access to that somewhere else. So this implies that you have some kind of central bank or central loan organization who's going to be good for the money. So it frees up your ability to travel. It frees up commerce because, again, the money doesn't have to be moved from Samarkand back to Cordova in order to go back the other way the next year, so that you can base it all on trust and faith. And Muslims became some of the greatest merchants of Middle Ages.
And the greatest craftsmen as well. From the Persians, Muslim blacksmiths learned how to fold steel to give it strength and flexibility. The swords made in Toledo and Damascus had no equal in the world. But the economic backbone of Islam's expanding wealth was textiles. The demand for the products of Muslim looms was enormous, for cashmere, cotton and silk.
Textiles were simply the gas and steel industry of medieval times, because you have to think of textiles not only as growing the plants, but making all the dyes, and it was the dyes that were particularly expensive and imported the farthest. And then you need all the fixtures and mordants and equipment for looms, and then you need to transport these textiles. So collectively, the industry of making and transporting textiles was the mainstay of the economy.
While Europeans settled for coarse woolen and linen garments, Muslims wore brocaded fabrics of organdie, damask and taffeta, words that came into the English language from Arabic and Persian.
The fabrics that were produced in the Islamic world were among the finest ever produced. And they were made of not only plain linen or cotton, but also very, very fancy silks, cloth of gold where silk thread is wrapped with gold, and with very, very complicated patterns.
These complex patterns were coveted by wealthy Europeans and the church as well. When the Christians needed a cloth worthy of wrapping the bones of their saints, the choice was obvious. They looked to a Muslim loom. But sometimes the fabrics were trimmed with decorative Arabic text from the Holy Quran. And so the words of the Prophet sometimes appeared in shocking proximity to Christendom's holiest icons.
It is not unusual to find in Italian Renaissance paintings, for example, to find paintings of the Virgin wearing a robe of very fancy patterned cloth and precious silks embroidered with gold or woven with gold designs. Sometimes they would say things with an Arabic inscription on it, which says, "There is no God but God, Muhammad is his prophet," in Arabic.
After almost 100 years of broken treaties and sporadic fighting, the Muslims reached a turning point in their struggles against the Crusaders. It came in the person of one of Islam's most celebrated figures. His name was Salah ud-Din, but the West would remember him and come to revere him as Saladin.
There is certainly one thing that we must recognize about Saladin, and that is that he was successful where many others of his faith and of his part of the world had not been. That he possessed one unusual feature, in addition to his intelligence and his robust physical strength. He certainly seems to have been a great inspirer of his military followers.